Okay, you want me to get some, well, how am I going to do that? Let me just try and think of a link. You see, I really need to tell you a little bit more of the story, really. I think there's more than one thread, but I'll only deal with one very briefly. A boy in Danny's school gets shot. He's killed in a shooting incident because there's a gun at home which belonged to somebody who was in the IRA. But the person who shoots him is actually his younger brother who thinks it's a toy. So this is a big tragedy, of course. And as an indirect result of this, Danny, well, I won't go into the details, I haven't time, but he meets up with the local IRA commander, Big Jim Harrison, and he's very scared of this meeting with Big Jim. But Jim turns out to be quite a charming, articulate sort of man. He treats him as a kindly uncle. And of course, Danny, as we know, loves electronics and building radio equipment. In fact, he already has a pirate radio station. And Big Jim, the IRA man, promises him that his station will never be closed down by the post office, who are the people who dealt with such things then, that he's able to fix it for him, you know. And in return, he'd like a few little favours from Danny. So Danny ends up building things for the IRA, and the most important thing he builds is a jamming system to jam police radio, and the IRA use this to rob a bank. But Danny's pleased with himself because the jamming device works. You know, he's really only interested technically, and he doesn't think about political or moral implications of what he's doing. He's drifting gently into the clutches of the IRA. I hope I can get this in. The school holidays arrive and Danny goes off to the Isle of Man on a holiday by himself. First time he's been away from home by himself. He's slightly involved with the IRA, but only quite slightly at this point. And on this holiday he meets the love of his life, who is to turn out to be the love of his life. You see, and until I've told you that, I can't really go to the song. Would I have time to read the 5-minute section about her?
Sure.
All right, okay, it's chapter 11. This is how he meets her. I'm really rushing through this, but I'm doing my best. Okay, he's on the deck of an old ship called the Manxman, a rusty old hulk that does the trip between Belfast and Douglas, Isle of Man. It did exist, might still be there, I don't know. Pretty awful old thing. And he's just drawing into the port. They're all standing on the deck, the ship's coming into dock. Now, I've described Douglas, what it looks like from the ship and the ship, etc. I won't read that because I haven't got time. But the most striking thing about the Bay of Douglas, any of you might even know it, there's a granite rock right in the middle of the bay, and on this rock they've built what looks like a little fairy tale castle. In fact, it's on the cover of the book. It's just like a castle. What it really is, it's a refuge tower for shipwrecked sailors. It contains fresh water and supplies. They built it in Victorian times. But it makes the city of Douglas kind of magic, you know, and it comes in quite a few times in my book as a kind of motif. Anyway, he's standing on the deck and he's just looking at the little castle in the Bay of Douglas. Engrossed in the scene, Danny turned around casually and found himself looking straight into the face of a girl who looked slightly younger than himself, with long, straight black hair. She was wearing a skimpy, almost see-through yellow summer dress and carried a small rucksack tossed over one shoulder. His stare must have been very obvious because she stuck her tongue out at him before giving him the most heart-stopping smile he had ever seen. How, in his craziest moments, could he have considered Claudette even vaguely pretty? She's the French assistant that he had a crush on at school. This was a goddess. He felt his heart pounding like Brian Bennett's drum intro on Apache, and a lump came to the back of his throat. A great wave of tenderness passed through him. In his almost 16 years on the planet, he had never seen a human face as beautiful as this, or a body so perfectly proportioned, had never been affected by the sight of another human being as profoundly as he was now. He continued to stare, tongue-tied and motionless. She was with her parents, seemingly their only daughter, and horror of horrors, her father was wearing the light grey suit and clerical dog collar of a Protestant minister. She giggled at Danny, and he dragged his eyes away from hers. He realised that he was physically shaking and his vision had become a little blurred. Also that a purpose had entered his life. Have I time to do this? I won't, I'll just tell you this bit. He tries to kind of shadow them as they go to their hotel in Douglas. He follows them at a distance. He makes a mess of it, and they see him and the girl waves at him and everything. It's a complete shambles. But anyway, they go into this hotel to unpack, and he goes into a cafe across the street. Even if the girl had been coy and had tried to avoid Danny's attention, he would have found a way to get to her. But in fact, she made no such effort. He only had to wait for an hour or so in the cafe across the road, give them enough time to carry their luggage to their rooms and unpack, and she obligingly reappeared alone, wearing the same yellow dress but with a rucksack replaced by a light beige shoulder bag, from which protruded a rolled up towel. She paused at the front entrance of the hotel and looked around. Danny leaped to his feet and, leaving his massive backpack on the floor of the cafe and his bill unpaid, ran giddily across the street to greet her. He stood in front of her, tongue-tied and suddenly feeling ridiculous, and stared at her with the expression of one afflicted with a learning disability. But she had already diagnosed his condition correctly. "Hello," she said very quietly. "Don't be scared. I won't bite. My name's Joyce. What's yours?" Danny suddenly realised that he'd been holding his breath and exhaled with a sound resembling a venting whale. "I'm Danny." "Danny? Right, hello. Do you fancy coming down to the beach for a swim?" "Yes, oh God, yes." The girl giggled. "I like you, you're funny." She took his hand, and almost entering a trance, he allowed himself to be led down the road in the direction of the beach. "Hey, you boy," a rough voice called from across the street. "We only accept money for coffee here, not rucksacks." Danny might have supposed himself to be dreaming, except that no dream had ever been as perfect as this or ever could be. He had his first kiss in the sea, standing higher than his waist in the gentle waves, the fairy tale castle out in the sea in front of him, lifting up her slender body with his right arm to reach her lips, feeling as he held her close the softness of her half-developed breasts and the hardness of her nipples underneath her swimsuit, her tongue probing softly between his teeth. He held her with infinite gentleness and care, as he would a delicate butterfly that he had rescued from a spider web to release in the garden. "God, I'm crazy about you," he whispered into her ear. "I know, I can feel it," she whispered back. She kissed him again, wrapped her legs around his waist, and almost imperceptibly at first, but with growing urgency, moved her pelvis, sometimes up and down, sometimes in a slow circular motion against his groin. "Oh my God," he mentally begged the deity in whom he did not believe. "Don't let me come. Not yet, please, not just yet." But God was not listening. So he's met the love of his life, and she knows the way to a boy's heart.